Welcome to this Killik Explains finance video. This week, why moats matter to equity investors. So, the context here. An investor should assess 4 things when looking at stocks. What are those 4 things? We're going to look at just one this week. So, profitability, cash flow and financial strength will be one. Not going to cover that here. The quality of management is important. Not going to cover that here either. The size of the firm's economic moat. Now that we are going to take a look at in a moment, but let's just wrap up this first slide by saying, put all those 3 things together and then ask the question, can I get in at a reasonable price? So we're not going to consider 3 of those 4, we're going to focus on 1, but here's an important one. Economic moats, an idea put around by legendary US investor Warren Buffett as a way of describing in a snapshot a big piece of jargon. And that big piece of jargon is sustainable competitive advantage. Quite easy for me to say. Warren Buffett said, if a firm has a wide economic moat, it probably has the ability basically to outshine competitors. Why? Because it can do a similar thing, offer a similar product or service, but make a lot more money doing it. Now, everybody would want to be in that space, so how do you get in? How do you defend it? And that's where moats come in. And there are 4 key ingredients. Not all firms have all 4 in play, but they have at least 1 or 2 of them going in their advantage. Cost advantage is 1, network effect is the other, barriers to entry and high switching costs. Very quick tour of each one of those. So, cost advantage, first of all, is what exactly? Well, the ability, as it says on the tin, to produce at a lower unit cost than rivals. And you need to be able to do that sustainably, not just today, but months and years into the future. So how do you do that? How do you protect that? How does it come about? Well, basically it's good news, because what it means is you might be priced the same as your competitors, because after all the price for a product will be dictated by supply and demand, competition and so on, but you squeeze more profit out of each item you sell, and you do it consistently. How? Well, it's the ability to dominate and squeeze the supply chain. So massive retailer, Sir Philip Green, was able to do that successfully at a number of different organizations. Basically, Japanese car companies have followed that model for years, squeezing suppliers, keeping costs down. And in terms of, broad brush, how do you get cost advantage? Well, technology and automation. Think about Amazon, for example, its ability to deliver to particular places all over the world within a day. That is leading technology. That sort of gives them a kind of USP, if you like. Productivity, so maybe you employ people for similar wages to other organizations. Maybe you don't, but you squeeze more work out of them. And thirdly, input costs. If you're able to control a specific supply of raw materials, big is beautiful, the Chinese are busy trying to make sure they corner the market in certain raw materials, then you get an automatic advantage, provided you can convert those at a relatively efficient cost. So, all sorts of ways in which firms can achieve cost advantage. Now, network effects are another. This is important in the internet sector, the technology sector, for example. The more people use a product or service, the better it becomes. Big is beautiful. So, size matters. The moat here is created by the sheer volume of activity. And once you become the go-to website or brand, if you like, it becomes very difficult to mimic what you're doing, provided you stay on your toes. More about that in a moment. So the firm becomes the go-to brand. Think about, say, a firm like PayPal in the payments market, or think about Facebook in the social media market. So how do you do it? Well, first of all, first mover advantage. You get in on a big trend early and you maintain your lead. You get people through the door by basically making the site, if that's what you're talking about, easy to use, quick to use, secure, low cost and innovative. You don't sit still, you keep adding new features to fend off rivals, to maintain that customer base. All right, and that's how you can potentially build what's called a network effect in summary. Number 3, barriers to entry. Now, some firms are in a great position insofar as they occupy a space that for different reasons is very difficult for rivals to just break into. Clearly, if they can see you making money, they're going to want to break that space open, but they can't. Why not? Capital intensity. It might just require an awful lot of time and capital to get your kind of business off the ground. Maybe you're in oil and gas, for argument's sake. Maybe you're an airline. Classic examples. Regulatory advantage. Pharmaceutical companies for years have enjoyed patents and licenses which have to be granted by a regulator. Not everyone can break into that market. Of course, when competition does flood the market, then watch out if you're overly reliant on just such a license. And finally, control of key intangibles. Take a football club. There's only one Ronaldo. If you've got him, bully for you. If you haven't, you can't clone him. All right. So other examples would include licenses, patents, and so on. So that is a key part of sustainable competitive advantage, a wide moat. And finally, high switching costs. You make it difficult for people to bail out and go to a competitor. Now, a firm can generate brand stickiness, in other words, and that's important. How do you do it? A unique product or service is the obvious way. Otherwise, make switches costly and time consuming. When you buy a mobile phone, for example, sign up for a contract. If you're locked in for, say, a couple of years, it gets difficult and expensive to bail out. And people are kind of fundamentally a little bit lazy, so perhaps they don't bother, even if they know they should, once they're locked in. And finally, interconnectivity. Some products make no sense in isolation, but do together. So take Gillette razor blades and a Gillette razor. Together, an effective product. Separate, they're not. The blades cost a small fortune, in my opinion. The handle costs very little. Put the two together and you've got a product which is interconnected. So there you have it, a very brief tour of the 4 ingredients that go into an economic moat. Any questions, editor@killik.com. And if you want to watch related videos on this topic, please go to killik.com/learn.